You are listening to Productivity Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after productivity coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives entrepreneurs the straight talk on personal productivity. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Productivity Straight Talk. Today is episode 154, Ask Amber. Have any tips for wrapping up conversations? This is a special episode brought to you by an Ask Amber segment. I got this question by It's Britsby via Instagram, where she DM'd me as a longtime listener of Productivity Straight Talk and said that she would like to know, what tips do I have for effectively and lovingly wrapping up conversations so that we can really be respectful of our time? And so I'm going to dive into my response to her question. Now, if you want to get featured on a future episode of Ask Amber, I would love to hear what your dying productivity question is that I may have not answered yet on the podcast. You can reach out to me personally by going to my Instagram account, Amber_De La Garza, or you can find us on Facebook at The Productivity Specialist on our Facebook page. I would love to hear from you. What questions do you have that you would like me to answer personally on Productivity Straight Talk? If you're a business owner who wants to improve your time management and elevate your productivity so you can maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. Before we jump into my response to It's Britsby, I would love to invite you to take advantage of my free mini training called Take Back Your Time. If you ever mumble to yourself or say out loud even, I wish I had more time, I would love for you to take me up on this free training. I have designed it exclusively for you as a small business owner in mind about how to reclaim 30 minutes each and every day. You can grab that by going to theproductivityspecialist.com/take back your time. And now let's get to the straight talk. I was so excited to get this question in my DMs because as soon as I read it, I was like, yes, I have lots of tips and strategies that I've either shared with clients or myself personally have navigated through, playing with and experimenting with what works, because it is so important that as we are business owners and we are meeting and talking to so many people, that every time we do that, it's an opportunity to do two things. One is respect our own time. And two, by respecting our own time, showing others that we respect our time will invite them to respect our time. And this is really, really important because you may think that wrapping up a conversation is solely about just like saving time and being more effective with your time. But I would actually invite you to the idea that it shows a strength of confidence, and it also shows others that you value your time, which when you do that on a recurring basis will solve a lot of issues of people trying to either take advantage of your time, abusing your time, not really thinking your time is valuable. And when we want others to see our time as valuable, we can't really control them, right? Like we're not in control of anyone's opinion. But what we can do is first lead with ourselves and value our own time. And what I have found is when we do that, more often than not, others will follow. All right. And some of this is that I was thinking about this, actually talking this out because I had this thought and then I was talking it out with my assistant, is that more often than not, when I get on a conversation, whether it's virtual and Zoom or a coffee meeting, honestly, even with my own family, like extended family, they utter the words of, well, I don't want to waste your time, or I want to be respectful of your time. That's a big one. I really want to be respectful of your time. I want to be aware of your time. And many people will wrap up a conversation when we're heading to the top of the hour because they're acutely aware that I value my time. Now, Obviously, I've built an entire business of productivity and time management, and so it's really on the forefront. But I don't really think that that's the only reason people are valuing my time. I truly believe because I have led with valuing my time, others follow. And this is going to be true for your personal life and your professional life. And I mentioned a little bit of this in a past episode of FOMO, meaning if you're asking others to respect your time to be working in a quiet work environment for 2 hours as we're navigating the pandemic, and they walk by and you're scrolling social media or taking a nap or doing something other than what that time was set out to do, you are actually communicating to them that you're not respecting your time. And so it's very hard to ask them to then, in return, respect your time when you decide, oh no, now's the time to work. The same thing is true when we meet with people. We are also training people on how to interact with us. So, for example, our clients, okay? Obviously, a lot of my business, maybe not obvious, you might be new around here, but a lot of my business is one-on-one coaching. And my one-on-one coaching is all done virtual, and they are for 45 minutes. I book my client sessions every hour to the hour, so that gives me a little bit of a wiggle room of going to the bathroom, transitioning to my next client, closing up the client I was just working with, and also a little wiggle room to end a conversation. If I continually ran over on my time with a client and then one day abruptly said, okay, we have 45 minutes, like that was our agreement, that would feel really uncomfortable. And so it's really important that you are always respecting those boundaries with your clients around time so that one day when you don't want to just, give them all the time in the world because you have another meeting coming up, that they've already been trained and expect that if the meeting was scheduled for an hour, it's an hour. If it's scheduled for 45 minutes, it's 45 minutes. And this is the first tip. So what you just heard me say is the pattern of how you show up and interact with people in your time in your meetings actually solves the issue for in the future. They're not going to want to go over your meeting time because you've already shown that the time that you have scheduled is the time that you have. All right, tip number 2 is that you always want to do the work of wrapping up the meeting before the meeting ever starts. I'm going to say that again. You always want to do the work of wrapping up the meeting before the meeting ever starts, and that's by seeding. One way that you can seed is by sending an invitation, right? A calendar invitation. And the calendar invitation will be a start and an end time. So maybe it's 30 minutes or it's 45 minutes or it's 1 hour. By communicating to them that you are scheduling for 30 minutes and sending them that invite and it gets on their calendar is the first clue that this is not a 1 hour meeting. This is not a 2 hour meeting. And even for a coffee meeting, that it's not going to run into your entire morning. The next opportunity to seed it is at the very beginning of the conversation. Now, this is both virtual and in person. One of my favorite ways of saying this is if I jump on a 30-minute call with someone, maybe I'm getting to know them or it's a discovery call or someone said, hey, I need you to meet my friend. Like, she's amazing. Sometimes that happens after conferences. So you do kind of like a coffee chat. Is I will jump on and say, it's so great to have an opportunity to meet you. During our time, I would love to get to know more about you. And then you've already brought up the word time. Like, I didn't say 30 minutes, but I just said, I'm setting my intentions for what I want to happen. Okay. Sometimes if it's a client call, meaning like a discovery call, I will actually say, thank you so much for scheduling a 30-minute call with me. My goal for the call is X, Y, and Z. And what I have just done is set an agenda and mentioned how long the meeting is. Now, all of that is so that In those two scenarios, what happens is that if we're at the 20-minute mark or the 25-minute mark, I may say something like, well, I want to make sure that I learn more about you. Or before, when we were introduced, I really had this question. So before we wrap up, I'd love to know X about you, right? That may be a more casual meeting. Those words of saying, before we wrap up, I just want to make sure that I get X, Y, and Z is cueing them that the meeting's coming to a wrap. Also, so when it's a client, I may say something like, I want to make sure that I answered all of your questions. Do you have any last questions before we wrap up today? And all of that is a transition towards the end, but it's not coming abruptly because I have seeded it on the front end of how long we have or what the agenda is for the meeting. And so what that means is that it's not confrontational. It's not something that is coming out of the blue. And now it's just a gentle reminder. You're cueing them that things are wrapping up. Now, tip number 3, this is a favorite. This is actually one of my go-tos when I first started my business because I wasn't as eloquent at wrapping up my sessions. And so I always felt tempted to want to, just keep talking. Like I love people and I love talking and I love chatting, but it would hijack my schedule. And so one of the things that I did was actually lean on external accountability. So instead of self-discipline of wrapping up a meeting at the top of the hour, even if I didn't have another meeting behind it, like I just needed to get work done or I needed to do something else on my to-do list, in that moment when you are engaged in a conversation, that could be incredibly tempting to just keep talking. And so this strategy was that I would schedule back-to-back meetings. Now, I still do that in my business almost always, but that's by way of wanting to batch my meetings. And that's a really effective way to get through my calendar and my schedule is to have meetings going back to back. But early on, that was not the motivator. The motivator was that I was having lots of coffee chats, like actually at coffee locations like Starbucks or wherever, a coffee cafe. And so what I would do is schedule a day, or I would schedule an afternoon like every 2 weeks. And then I would say, yeah, I would love to meet with you at 9. And then I would tell the next person at 10. And I would tell the next person at 11. And then I would maybe have a lunch meeting. And I would do that maybe once or twice a month when I was doing much more in-person meetings. And what that allowed for was that I did schedule a coffee chat with them for an hour, but that I actually had someone else coming to meet me at that same cafe at the top of the hour. And so it did require me to wrap up a session and make sure we got the most out of our time together because I had that external accountability of the next person coming in after them. And I found that to be an incredible use of my time by not just batching, but also just going into each of the conversations, wanting to get the most out of the time that was scheduled and not thinking there's no end time to our chatting and hanging out. Now, I feel like I do need to tell you that there are times that I do not have end times to meetings. I'm going to give you a couple examples. I have 2 groups of ladies that I meet with on a monthly basis, pre-pandemic. Now it's all virtual, but that we meet and do happy hour, okay? And they are people that I've known for a very long time, and it is some business, but really social. There is no end time, right? Like we just have a start time and we may be having drinks and we're laughing and we're hanging out and there is no agenda. That is not what I'm talking about. I am talking about when there is a time and place for a business type meeting, there should always be an agenda. You should always seed the conversation ahead of time. You should always end a meeting on time, not just to be respectful of your time, but respectful of their time. And the added bonus that when you lead with respecting your time, they will now respect your time. Here's some other examples that may come up with wrapping up conversations. How about getting text messages from your family or friends during the business day? Look, we all get it, right? And sometimes it's a quick response that may not be too distracting and we want to answer. But many times it's a conversation going back and forth and back and forth. So one of my go-to solutions for wrapping up those types of conversations is I will respond because I want to acknowledge them and love them and respect them. But I will often say something like, can I circle back with you tonight? Right? And so that is cueing them in that I'm in the middle of something, that I cannot have this conversation right now. It's not best use of my time, energy, or focus. And I want to give that to them. And I can do so at the end of the evening. Okay, so that's really, really important that we can communicate that in a respectful way, but also setting those boundaries. If you get into these long conversations and then, the next week your mom texts you and you're like MIA and not responding, that's really giving a lot of mixed signals. And so you want to kind of decide what is your policy of communicating personally on your business time versus keeping that kind of in your off hours. We want to make sure that we're always leading by example and not giving mixed messages so that we don't feel like we're always having the conversation of, I can't talk, mom, or I can't talk, friend. Actually, friend, here's a good one. So I am in a group chat with about 9 of my girlfriends, none of them are business owners. They're all local friends. And they love to chat, and they chat on text. And we may go like over a week or 2 weeks and there's nothing on the chat. And then all of a sudden they start firing off. And next thing I look down, there's 20 texts. So what have I had to do? Well, I mute the whole channel. Like I never have that chat group chiming, ringing, or dinging or getting my attention. And so I will see it if I'm already in my phone looking at other text messages. And I will always respond after hours because I know that that's a hole I can't get myself out of once I start chit-chatting with them or reading all the texts that seem to be firing off throughout the entire day. And so if you're in one of those group chats, it's just about setting those boundaries, or even if you just kind of chime in and say, hey, I'm going to jump in tonight and respond, you're now communicating to them without the need or feeling of it hijacking your day. Look, I remember when I first started coaching and I thought, how in the world am I going to end a conversation when someone is in the middle of a conversation? Like they are in the middle of talking to me. They're in the middle of sharing with me what's going on. And I often reference to counselors, right? Like you're literally laying it all out to them, probably very, very emotional, and you get an hour. And I was like, well, how does that work? Like, how does a counselor stay on the hour every hour, right? I'm like, well, if they can do it, surely I can do it. And I want you to think about that. We're looking for positive proof. When you think you can't wrap up a meeting, know that there are plenty of people and industries that are wrapping up meetings, but because they have determined that that is their norm, and you can do the same. And I would also end with the fact that wrapping up a meeting on time is an incredible way to respect others. Okay, so you are able to show respect for their time. And so maybe if you didn't seed the conversation ahead of time, and maybe if you abruptly realized it was the top of the hour, you find yourself like, oh my gosh, how do I transition out? And my go-to phrase is, I want to be respectful of your time, and we're at the top of the hour. So we probably need to end the meeting. Or maybe I just ended it. I want to be respectful of your time and we're at the top of the hour and wow, the time got away. Maybe we should reschedule some time or whatever makes sense. Like don't fill in the blank and say reschedule time if you don't want to meet with them. But my point is that you can abruptly say it with like, hey, I want to respect your time and we are at the top of the hour, period. And let that rest. It will end a meeting. So you always have that phrase in your back pocket. All right, my friends, there are some tips about wrapping up meetings. And most importantly, the big why it's important to wrap meetings up on time is to show a respect of your own time and a respect for other people's time. And as you do that more and more often, I think you'll find yourself in less situations of having to hold those boundaries of holding meetings on time. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Productivity Straight Talk. If you have enjoyed this episode or any of the previous episodes, don't keep it a secret. Share it with another business owner that you think would find value in each of the episodes I share with you here on Productivity Straight Talk. Now, I have loved having you listen, but you know, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So maybe I said like one phrase that you could tweak on how to close up and wrap up a conversation. Take it, put it into action as soon as possible, because the quicker you put it into action, now it becomes your new norm. I want you to think of this episode every time you're tempted to ignore that a meeting should be ended, and think, I am going to take that action because I am going to take a stance in respecting my time and the time of the person that I'm with. So I would love to hear any questions that you have. You have a burning question about productivity, shoot it over and we will consider it for a next episode of Ask Amber. And if you have not done so, make sure you grab my free Take Back Your Time mini training, and it will be linked to the show notes right here in the app that you are listening to this episode. All right, so that's my straight talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.